Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece on June 30th, 2026 for Reason to Resist. In today's episode, I'll begin by discussing the status of negotiations between the United States and Iran under their recently signed Memorandum of Understanding. Then I'll review Israel's latest violations of the 5 ceasefire agreements governing its genocidal war on Lebanon. Finally, I'll focus on the all-important events in the Strait of Hormuz and the current conditions in global oil markets. Before I begin, please remember, if you find this video to be informative, to like and share it. And please do become a subscriber to Reason to Resist if you have not already become one. And help us to achieve our goal of 200,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, which marks the 2-year anniversary of the founding of Reason to Resist. Now, before I begin, I would like also to mention that I'll be departing tomorrow for Iran. I will be there for a variety of reasons, one of which, of course, will be to cover the funeral of the assassinated supreme leader of Iran, Imam Khameini. And Iranian officials anticipate, they say, some 15 to 20 million mourners will participate in this multi-day funeral ceremony, which will span several cities across the country. And that will truly be, I think, a remarkable event, and one that is seminal in the modern era, because the murder of Khamenei and his daughter, son, and his 14-month-old granddaughter, this was an atrocity by any reasonable measure, a flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter. The whole war is, of course, but the larger significance of this, quite apart from its brazen illegality, is that it has massively unbalanced this region and resulted in a considerable shift of power away from the West, and particularly the United States, and towards Iran, which is, of course, not at all what the intention of this criminal war of aggression was at the outset. Now, quite apart from the funeral of the assassinated supreme leader, there are many reasons to be in Iran at this moment. For one thing, I would like to explore what the economic and political conditions are in the country since I left at the end of March during the hot war. That was March of this year. It has now been about 3 months, and there has been a blockade that has been imposed upon the country. There was more savagery inflicted upon the country by Israeli and U.S. bombardments after I departed. And there has been a lot of debate within Iranian society, and not only at the level of the government and political commentators, but amongst ordinary citizens, of course, about the wisdom of pursuing these negotiations with the treacherous and perfidious Trump regime. And so it will be quite interesting to hear from ordinary Iranians. I certainly hope to do that, as to their views about whether these negotiations should be pursued, and if so, how they should be conducted. And if you don't believe me when I say there's a vigorous debate, all you have to do is watch Iranian television, because that debate has surfaced on Iranian television repeatedly during the past several weeks. Now, I'll be joined in Iran also, I'm happy to say, by my colleague Rami Yahia, who has been bravely reporting on the ground in Lebanon for the past 3 weeks. He's currently in Beirut, and he will be joining me in Tehran on the same day as my arrival in a couple of days' time. Now, let's get into it. As many of you will know, the U.S. bombed Iran on Thursday and Friday of last week in flagrant violation of the Memorandum of Understanding. The second round of bombing, the Friday round of bombing, was announced by CENTCOM 36 minutes after the stock markets closed on Friday. How convenient. And here you have a market professional, Jim Bianco, noting that CENTCOM posted this announcement 36 minutes after the New York Stock Exchange closed for the weekend. And he ironically concludes with the word coincidence. Of course, he jests. Now, moments after CENTCOM made this announcement, I predicted on X that before the markets opened on Monday, yesterday, the Trump regime would tell the world that the latest round of violence had ended and that the parties were clasping hands and singing Kumbaya. And here you can see my post on X on Friday of last week. In retaliation for a second night of bombing by the child-killing U.S. military, Iran has fired missiles and drones at U.S. bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. In all likelihood, Trump will declare that the latest hostilities are over and peace reigns supreme before markets reopen on Monday. Sure enough, on Sunday, Trump's favorite scribe in the corporate media, the former or perhaps current Israeli intelligence officer Barak Ravid, who works at the corporate media outlet Axios, reported that an unnamed U.S. official had told him that the Trump regime and Iran had agreed to halt the attacks and to meet this week to resume negotiations. So this was on Sunday, just before the markets opened. And as is normally the case, when Axios and Barak Ravid in particular makes these convenient statements, convenient to the Trump regime, of course, they are always based on some unnamed U.S. official. Once in a while, he tosses in some unnamed Israeli official. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 Israeli and U.S. officials, but they're always unnamed, almost always. And that should tell you something. Why would somebody have to give this information to Ravid, a U.S. official, off the record? Why wouldn't they be able to identify themselves? I mean, is there something scandalous? Is this classified information? The reason why they are not willing to go on the record is because they're spewing bullshit and they don't want to be held to account for the lies which Barak Ravid is faithfully, uncritically repeating again and again and again in a flagrantly obvious effort to manipulate the price of oil downward. As was also predictable, Iranian officials denied this bogus claim. Nonetheless, on Monday, the following day, Trump claimed, telling the media in the United States, that Iran had requested talks. It's always the other side. It's always Trump's adversaries who are desperate for negotiations, no matter how much aggression and treachery he is exhibiting towards them. And he said that there were going to be talks in Doha this week. That's the claim that Trump made on Monday of this week, and you can see it here. This was reported in Al Jazeera, but it was reported all over the press, of course. And you can see in the second bullet point here on this screenshot, however, a senior Iranian official says there are no planned meetings with U.S. officials from technical teams in Doha this week. Nonetheless, Trump dispatched his favorite shysters, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, off for another boondoggle trip to Doha to accomplish precisely nothing. Apparently, they are there now, as are reportedly some Iranian officials, but the Qataris, who are, by the way, vassals of the United States, and despite that fact are purporting to act as mediators between the United States and Iran, have told the press that there are no meetings planned between the shysters or other U.S. officials and Iranian officials. Apparently, what they're going to do in Doha, the U.S. and Iranian officials, is they're going to speak to the mediators. And whether anything will come of that, we shall see. But Iran, I think, has made quite clear, and you can see this from the foreign ministry's comments, what they're prioritizing is the situation in Lebanon, the genocidal rampage in Lebanon, which is ongoing, flagrantly violating the MOU, and the return of their stolen assets. The media likes to call them frozen, but they were just stolen. So we'll see whether any progress is made, but apparently there are going to be no face-to-face meetings this week. At least there's none planned at this stage. Meanwhile, Israel is engaging in ever more barbaric attacks on Palestine and Lebanon, again, in blatant violation of the Iran-US MOU, which requires, let me remind you all, a halt to all military operations on all fronts. And unquestionably, Palestine is one of those fronts. In fact, it is the original front. It is the front where all of this savagery began in October 2023, when Israel announced that it was going to treat the Palestinians in Gaza as animals and was going to deprive them of all food, water, medicine, and impose a total blockade, along with the most destructive bombing campaign I think many of us have witnessed in our lifetimes. Here's the most recent report from the Gaza Health Ministry. And by the way, its figures are always extremely conservative, as many experts around the world have noted. They say this was in relation to the killing spree in Gaza yesterday. This report was issued today. Every day, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza puts out a summary of the casualties for the prior day. So for yesterday, there were 8 new martyrs. They killed 8 people, 26 injuries in the Gaza Strip. That was in the prior 24 hours. A number of victims are still under the rubble and on the roads as ambulance and civil defense crews are unable to reach them now. Since the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire, which purportedly began on October 11, 2025, the genocidal child-murdering Israelis have killed 1,053 people in Gaza. The vast majority of them unquestionably civilians, many of them children, and they've wounded 3,406. This is during a period of ceasefire. That's what the West and the corporate media and Western governments call it. And they've retrieved during this period 786 bodies under the rubble. Now, they say, the Ministry of Health in Gaza, that the total of the Israeli aggression from October 2023 is now in excess of 73,000 persons and almost 174,000 wounded. But as the eminent and admirable UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese recently noted, the number is almost certainly in the hundreds of thousands. I believe the number that she gave, the best estimate based on expert analysis, is in excess of 600,000 people. And the killing just won't stop. Now, Israeli media are reporting that Hamas is getting ready to return to battle. And here you can see a report in the Times of Israel published yesterday. An unsourced report claims the quote-unquote terror group is recruiting new fighters, has resumed training its elite Nukhba force as U.S. peace plan fails to progress. Why is that, I wonder? Might it be that the Israelis are trying to steal every last inch of Gaza and to destroy what remains of the civilian population? And now, this report might just be, some pretext that the Israelis are offering for a rapid, massive escalation in their killing spree in Gaza. They'll say that it's preemptive. But whether or not this report is motivated, it's a fake report, and it's motivated by a desire to provide a pretext for a return to the full-scale horror that we saw, prior to October 2025. I think that it's quite inevitable that Palestinians in Gaza are going to take up arms. After all, if you were in their situation, from October 2025 to the current time, they have not fired upon Israeli forces. And yet, every single day, the Israelis are killing their children, destroying what remains of the infrastructure, burning people alive in these dilapidated tents that the Palestinians, the survivors, are forced to live in, depriving them of electricity, basic medical supplies, clean water, sanitation, in every conceivable way. The Israelis are seeking to slowly kill off the survivors of their genocidal rampage in Gaza, and they're constantly encroaching on the parts. I think it's now just about 30% of the Gaza Strip remains nominally under the control of the Palestinian resistance. So if you're in their situation, what would you do? Are you just going to go quietly into the night, suffering in the most unimaginable ways, and allow your children to be wiped off the face of the earth? Or would you say, I may as well take up arms because at least I will die with dignity? And if that means, even if all I have to do, to defend myself and my family is throw stones, I'll do whatever's necessary in order to die with dignity. That is precisely what the Palestinians are going to do. I can guarantee you that. This is not going to go on much longer, and it is precisely because Israel is constantly uh, terrifying and maiming and killing Palestinians with the complete support of almost every single Western government that this has become an inevitability. Whether it will happen in the next few weeks, in a few months' time, no one can say other than perhaps people inside Gaza. But mark my words, it will happen, and it will be entirely the fault of the West and Israel when it does happen. Now, turning to Lebanon, Israel's genocidal military has released a video of a horrifying explosion that it triggered in the south of Lebanon in the last couple of days. Now, I just want to show you the latter part of this brief clip again. Look in the foreground between, the foreground of the explosion. You can see that there are homes there. It's a village right at the edge of this gigantic explosion and fireball. Watch this again. This explosion was so unusually large, even by the standards of the satanic Israeli military, that some people are speculating on social media that the Israelis used a tactical nuclear weapon for this strike. Look, I don't have the expertise to say whether that explosion resembles what one would expect from the detonation of a tactical nuclear weapon. But I doubt that the Israelis did that because they would be subjecting not only their own troops, but also the civilian population in the north of occupied Palestine, the Israeli civilian population, to nuclear fallout. And they don't need to use tactical nuclear weapons to engage in massive destruction of civilian infrastructure. We've seen that quite clearly with terrifying effect in the Gaza Strip. Now, whereas the Lebanese military did not retaliate to Israel's countless ceasefire violations in 2025, this time it is not sitting idly by while Israel makes a mockery of the five ceasefire agreements currently governing Israel's war on Lebanon. Let's begin with an attack, a very successful operation carried out by the Lebanese resistance a couple of days ago. They managed to eliminate a terrorist in the Israeli military by the name of David Hazout. He was a platoon commander in the child murdering Golani Brigade and a captain in the Israeli military. A number of other Israeli terrorists were wounded in that attack. It's not clear to me how many. I don't know that that has been publicly disclosed. And apparently this operation was carried out by a single fighter from the Radwan forces of the Lebanese resistance. Now, in addition, there were reports on Telegram channels, resistance Telegram channels today, that according to the Israeli media, I believe this is the Hebrew language Israeli media because I haven't been able to find it in the English language Israeli media, an explosive device was detonated targeting the forward command post of the deputy commander of the Commando Brigade in southern Lebanon. 2 reserve soldiers from the unit were wounded. One is in critical condition and the other in moderate condition. Both were evacuated by helicopter. And there was another report to that effect just a short time later. These reports were issued actually yesterday, not today. So it often takes some time for the Israeli media to receive authorization to disclose the identities and the ranks of the individuals who were wounded or killed. But what's very interesting here is that yet again, the Lebanese resistance seems to be focusing with considerable effect its attacks on commanders in Israel's genocidal military. The fact that they're doing that implies, I think, it's that they have considerably more sophisticated intelligence capabilities than they have had in the past, and that may be due to their increasingly effective use of first-person view drones. Now, there's one other news item that I want to mention to you before we turn to the Strait of Hormuz, and that is this interesting tidbit reported by Israel today. A 20-year-old U.S. citizen residing in the Jerusalem area will be accused in court of security offenses for allegedly spying on Iran's behalf. The young man was arrested June 9th on suspicion of maintaining contact with an Iran-linked agent, police say in a statement. The suspect over the past several months allegedly took photos and videos of sensitive sites. For each task, he received dozens to hundreds of dollars. Dozens of dollars? He was giving intelligence to Iran for dozens of dollars per information. That's unusual, to say the least, risking prosecution for a serious criminal offense. In any case, the prosecutor's declaration is filed against the suspect today, signaling he will be formally charged in the near future. Police have requested the court keep the young man in custody until the end of the legal proceedings against him. It's interesting, they don't say anything. They don't say whether this is an Israeli citizen, although presumably it is. And there have been many reports like this over the past 2 years. There have been probably dozens of charges brought at this stage by Israeli police against people who have been accused of spying for Iran. Whether, in fact, those allegations are well-founded, I have no idea. But if they are, this would suggest that the Iranians, like the Lebanese resistance, have considerably more sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities than they have in the past. And it's interesting that when Netanyahu and the entire Israeli political elite are presenting Iran as an existential threat to Israel, there are so many Israelis willing to cooperate, collaborate allegedly with Iran, and even for hundreds of dollars. I don't know what to make of that. I'll leave that to you. Now, with that, let us turn then to the all-important Strait of Hormuz. I'd like to begin with a statement, an important statement that was issued by the government of Oman within the past 24 hours. And here is the statement up on the scene. This was helpfully summarized by Dropsite News. And the foreign minister of Oman, as reported by Dropsite News, laid out the Sultanate's position on the strait in an interview with a local publication, which was published by the foreign ministry, which lends weight, according to Dropsite, to the legal framework Iran has proposed for charging ships. The foreign minister said Oman opposes tolls on transit itself, which he said are prohibited under international law, but drew, a quote, clear distinction between transit fees and maritime, environmental, and navigational services that may be discussed voluntarily with the benefiting states and companies. The same distinction Iran has invoked to justify proposed service fees. He also had responsibility for clearing the roughly 80 lines and steering shipping lanes rests primarily with Iran under the memorandum, while Oman is contributing through regional international efforts. The foreign minister explained that such services may include enhancing navigational safety, protecting waters from pollution, and improving preparedness to respond to accidents or emergencies, noting that existing models such as the Strait of Malacca and Singapore could be drawn upon. So he seems to be suggesting there that there may be other countries that have a coastline on an international strait that want to pursue the same approach. He also said Oman and Iran agree any future arrangements for the strait will remain within international law and the rights of the coastal states. So, as I explained in a recent episode, there is a huge amount of pollution being generated by these vessels that are going through the Strait of Hormuz, and any one of those tankers, if it were to suffer a catastrophic accident and a rupture causing huge amounts of oil to spill into the strait, this would have devastating impacts on the territorial waters and the coastlines of Iran and Oman. And so why should these two countries bear that risk and have to tolerate all of the pollution being generated by this enormous amount of tanker and cargo ship traffic? when these countries that are sending and these companies that are sending these vessels through the strait are making huge amounts of money from the sale of their commodities, particularly oil and gas. And so it just is fundamentally unfair to put all of that risk and that cost onto Iran and Oman. It is eminently reasonable, again, when you consider how much profit they generate from the sale of their commodities, that they should pay some affordable fee. And I believe that there is a plausible basis in international law for the position being articulated by Iran and now apparently by Oman. And what's most admirable about this is it was just a few weeks ago that Donald Trump threatened to blow Oman up if it cooperated with Iran on the imposition of fees or tolls on ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. That doesn't seem to have deterred the Sultanate, and nor should it. And by the way, over time, this would amount to a huge amount of money. And I'm quite sure that the people of Oman and of Iran would benefit handsomely, as they should, from the tanker traffic going through this all-important strait. Now, traffic today through the Strait of Hormuz remains very low relative to pre-war levels. A few minutes before beginning this report, I checked marinetraffic.com, and it is a reliable site for real-time information about transit, not just in the Strait of Hormuz, but maritime transit around the world. And here's what it currently shows, actually. I'm showing you what it shows at this particular moment. And you can see here that there's just, let me just back up and explain. If you see an arrow pointing to up or left, that means that there is a large vessel going from the Sea of Oman through the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. And if you see a large red arrow pointing to the right, and you'll see right in the middle of the screen, I have there's a circle and a flashing arrow in red. That means that that vessel is traveling out of the Persian Gulf and into the Strait, into the Sea of Oman. And you can see that there's just a few arrows. The green, by the way, there are also green arrows. They're much more difficult to make out. Those are small vessels that are going into the Persian Gulf or coming out. And I've highlighted this particular tanker that is heading out of the Persian Gulf and into the Sea of Oman, because apparently it is providing oil, or it is transporting oil belonging to Iran. And you can see here that the name of this vessel is the Amak crude oil tanker. And that tanker is reportedly part of the so-called shadow fleet that transports sanctioned Iranian oil. So, the very few vessels that are going through the Strait of Hormuz, a number of them are actually carrying commodities, and particularly oil, from Iranian ports to export destinations. So very little traffic here in any event, as you can see at this particular moment from this website. Now, I also checked the Hormuz tracker, which I've referred to frequently in the past, which shows also the number of vessels that are currently transiting the strait. It showed just before we started this episode, 38 are currently transiting the strait. It doesn't give any information about whether they're large or small and how many of them are associated with Iran. And it also said that there were 28 that had transited the strait in the last 24 hours. Now, as I've mentioned before, average traffic through the Strait of Hormuz prior to the war was 130 vessels per day. So the 28 vessels, which the Hormuz tracker says passed through the Strait of Hormuz in the last 24 hours, is only 22% of pre-war traffic. And this means that the massive global oil deficit that has accumulated during this criminal war of aggression on Iran is not getting better. It's not being alleviated. In fact, it is getting worse, potentially. Now, I've been following carefully the commentary of oil industry experts, and many of them remain alarmed about the volatile and dangerous situation in the Strait of Hormuz. I'm going to share some commentary from a Canadian oil patch expert. He's a portfolio manager in, I believe, Alberta, the province of Alberta, and his name is Eric Nuttall. He has apparently given testimony before the Canadian Parliament, so the government of Canada considers him to be a credible oil industry expert. He said the oil market is in a race against the clock. Global oil inventories continue to fall, with onshore storage now at its seasonally lowest point in recorded history. I repeat, onshore storage is at its seasonally lowest point in recorded history. Straight inbounds remain far below necessary levels to allow the return of 11 million barrels of oil a day of still shut-in Middle Eastern production. That is the deficit, the daily deficit resulting from the closure of the Strait. Now, I just want to pause here and point something out, which I've come to understand from reading and listening to oil industry experts. You know, when the Strait was opened, and it doesn't really appear to have been fully opened or even close to fully opened at any time since this MOU was signed, and I'm going to come back to that. But, you know, certainly Iran has been allowing significantly higher levels of traffic than it was during the hot phase of the war. You know, now that that's happened, that the so-called opening has occurred, there has been this relative avalanche of oil tankers out of the Persian Gulf. They've been waiting for months to get out. Their crews want to go home. They're tired. You know, these vessels are needed elsewhere. They basically have not been available for usage by these corporations. So they're trying to seize the opportunity to get the hell out of the Persian Gulf right now. So there's kind of like this huge outflow, but the question remains, who's going to venture back in? Once these vessels are cleared out, and that creates, you know, what some oil industry experts are characterizing as a temporary glut of oil, will they actually go back in? Will they be allowed back in? And even if they're theoretically allowed, will they want to take the risk, or are they just not going to go? Nobody seems to know, and I think, as a matter of fact, nobody does know what the answer to that question is, because this is really an unprecedented situation. And so far, all indications are that there are not too many vessels, oil tankers and LNG tankers, that are willing to go back into the Persian Gulf, especially with these sporadic attacks being launched by the United States on Iran and Iran's retaliation. So the situation ain't getting any better. And he goes on, Eric Nuttall, on this next post, and he says this: Iran is clearly in charge, and my best advisors continue to believe that they will not relinquish control. This is a rare example of a sane commentator from the oil industry on the military reality of the Strait of Hormuz. And he says the biggest unknown is Chinese imports, down 4.7 million barrels per day. That's huge. China's, as now has been widely reported, after the Strait of Hormuz was closed, its imports fell sharply. It's unclear exactly how the Chinese government engineered that. Were they drawing upon the massive stockpile? Did they shut down some oil-intensive activities for a period of time? Was it a combination of both of those things? Was it something else? In any case, that's what kept, and there seems to be a consensus building around this, that's what kept the price of oil from going absolutely sky high, is China cut back its oil imports dramatically during this period. And he says, Eric Nuttall, that the single biggest reason why we did not see the demand-reducing price spike yet was the reduction in Chinese imports. Visible Chinese inventories have barely fallen, yet their imports are down 450 million barrels. This is a significant and unsustainable drop in an invisible refined product of oil stocks. When does China come back? Sure, that's true. When does China begin importing at pre-war levels? And will it in fact engage in more than, will it import more oil than it was importing before the war, just before the war, in order to replenish whatever reduction there has been in Chinese oil inventories? Again, people don't know the answers to those questions. And he says, Nuttall, with only 90 million barrels of remaining barrels stuck in the strait, the net balance once that is absorbed is outbound tankers versus curtailed production versus reduced inbound track tankers. The one to watch equals continued inventory draws. With the crude curve below pre-war levels, the market is completely apathetic to the above, fully believing in every tweet declaring imminent peace. Yet the clock continues to count down to operational lows and tank bottoms. Bottom line, my friends, is that the oil crisis ain't over, and it could very well get considerably worse, especially once the market has absorbed all of that oil that was accumulated and held up in the Persian Gulf. No one really knows what's going to happen. And of course, if we get back into something like a hot war, then the small increase that we have seen thus far in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz could be shut down entirely again. And then we're in a world of pain. Now, I want to just finally comment on what I think is going on here, what the Iranian government is doing. And I've given a lot of thought to this, and I've expressed reservations, in prior episodes, and I still have some reservations about what the Iranian government is doing. The problem is that we really don't have key information to understand the thinking behind its continuing with this process, this MOU. It hasn't abandoned the negotiations, even though there has been a temporary freeze, shall we say, in face-to-face discussions between the two sides. And for obvious reasons, because of the horrors that Israel continues to inflict on Lebanon and Palestine, because the Americans have not yet unfrozen the Iranian assets, and because the Americans keep attacking Iran. They're conducting a military buildup in violation of the MOU. Donald Trump is threatening Iran in violation of the MOU. The Iranians have plenty of reason not to be too generous in terms of how many ships they allow through the Strait of Hormuz, but they are allowing a significant number through the Strait of Hormuz, even though the Trump regime is committing all of these violations of the MOU. Why? Well, I think the answer is quite simply that this has resulted in a lifting of the blockade on Iranian ports. Iran has been through an absolutely horrific period. The sanctions for decades, maximum pressure sanctions, now 2 wars of aggression launched against Iran within the last 14 months or so. There have been, there's been cyber warfare. There have been numerous attacks on Iranian forces around the region outside of Iran. There was the destruction of the Iranian diplomatic compound in Damascus. I could go on and on. So this is an economy that has suffered tremendously as a result of the cumulative effect of all of these crimes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And it is undoubtedly starved for revenue. I don't know how dire the situation is, but I think we can safely assume that the Iranian government has a serious need for revenue from the sale of oil. And so I think what they're trying to do is it's a very delicate balancing act that I think the Iranian government is trying to do. They're trying to allow just enough ships through the Strait of Hormuz so that Donald Trump doesn't reimpose a blockade on Iranian ports and they can continue selling their oil and other commodities. But at the same time, they don't want to let too many ships through the Strait of Hormuz and take the pressure off of Donald Trump to make good on the commitments he signed on to in the memorandum of understanding. So it is a tightrope, a tightrope that they're basically walking here. They may be perfectly aware that Donald Trump is not going to ultimately honor this agreement, that he is going to go back to a hot war. They're never going to see a $300 billion reconstruction fund. They're never going to get all of their stolen assets returned to them. They're never going to get all of the sanctions lifted, at least not under the Trump regime. They may be perfectly aware of that, but they are, engaged in this balancing act to bring in much needed revenue while maintaining a substantial degree of pressure on the Trump regime. And if that is in fact their strategy, I think that they are so far managing it rather well under extremely difficult circumstances. But as I say, I don't have enough information to say with level of confidence. In fact, that is what the thinking of the Iranian leadership is. And hopefully, when I go to Iran, this week, I'll have an opportunity to speak to people who are more knowledgeable about the situation within Iran and the thinking of government officials, so that I can ascertain whether, in fact, this is the case. For now, that is our report on June 30th, 2026. You might not hear from me again until I arrive in Iran in a couple of days' time. I will possibly do a report tomorrow, depending upon what developments unfold. But if there isn't any major news, I might not come back to you until July 1st. In any case, thank you for watching today. I'm signing off from Kalamata, Greece on June 30th, 2026.